SAA not happening for now. SAA, you'll recall, is under business rescue, and retrenchment notices were issued to employees by those business rescue practitioners. But the judge saying that they were issued in a way that was procedurally unfair. It is the latest twist in the saga of the bankrupt national airline, which unions, as Pakamile was saying, want to save. To discuss, we're joined by aviation analyst and editor of SA Flyer magazine, Guy Leitch. Guy, thank you for being with us. So this is a victory for unions and a major blow, it must be, for the business rescue practitioners.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Francis. It is. I suspect that this, however, may run the risk of being a completely hollow Pyrrhic victory. Eventually, I think government will just really give up and realize that they're not going to win against Labour Union and say, well, that's it, we can really do no further. We're just going to liquidate the airline, in which case they would be left with basically just next to nothing. A uniform payout, the number talked about is in the order of 28,000 Rand, which would obviously be an enormous setback. So there is a real concern, at least, that they may have won this particular round with Labour Court and against the business rescue practitioners. But long term, the situation has to be bleak because government really doesn't have the money, or let me rephrase that, shouldn't have the money to be bailing out the airline at this stage. It's going to take at least 9 months before the airline is even remotely ready to begin to actually start carrying useful loads. IATA, the International Air Transport Association, is talking more like 18 months to 2 years before loads can become commercially viable. So the government will have to carry the airline at least for that period. It could be as much as R1 billion a month at this stage without any revenue coming in. So that's a huge burden to put on taxpayers. Whether government is actually prepared to continue to do that, I don't know. And while I'm talking about it, let's just look at the problems faced by the business rescue practitioners. They were ready to present a plan in January, and government wasn't prepared to accept the costs of that plan and the retrenchments that were involved in that plan. Then they went back to the drawing board, and then COVID-19 hit. And they really cannot be expected to plan under the effects of COVID-19. So where we go from here is really anyone's guess. Yeah. It's quite frankly a very liquid situation and a standoff.
This is a very difficult situation, but Minister Pravin Gordhan himself, Public Enterprises Minister, wanting to work with the unions to revive SAA, seemingly bypassing those business rescue practitioners. So you're saying that's there, but it doesn't represent real hope for the airline?
Well, it does. It just depends on the will of government. I think that we often see government, at least up to February, March, talking with two voices. We've heard Pravin Gordhan say the airline must be saved, jobs must be protected. On the other hand, we've heard Minister Tito Mboweni saying that the government just does not have any money to continue to bail the airline out. Well, of course, government has now effectively made a 500 billion Rand available for the COVID-19 costs. And of that, 100 billion Rand is available for business development or business rescue. So it's quite possible that they could provide 10 billion Rand for SAA's strategy out of that. So, maybe Labour has a point. Maybe the airline can be kept going for the next 10 or 12 months until it begins to fly loads. But I also need to point out that the rescue strategy, what is called often SAA version 2.0, actually is the most difficult of all the strategies to implement, simply because the most important part of SAA is the most difficult to be profitable on, and that is the long-haul routes. It is relatively profitable on regional routes and even domestic routes, but long-haul has always been a problem where the big foreign carriers have eaten the SAA's lunch because of a geographical advantage and because of SAA's inefficiencies and high costs. And yet that's the part that government wants to preserve for the sake of airlift capability or connectivity, of bringing the world to Africa and taking Africa to the world. Yeah. That is an almost impossible task to turn around, particularly if government continues to be a major stakeholder in the airline and impose any form of development initiative or agenda on it, including the protection of jobs. So it's an extremely difficult position. I say government is literally caught between a rock and a hard place on this particular problem.
Also, the new plan, the plan for a new version of SAA seems to rely on the private sector, on somebody coming in to put down cash so that some of those bailouts can be avoided. You did say, however, that's not an impossibility, even though we are in COVID-19 times.
It's an extremely long shot at this stage. Quite frankly, the rest of the airline industry around the world is also pretty much on its knees, begging for government assistance. I just consider it extremely unlikely that any airline is going to want to embark on an ambitious expansion project by getting involved in a struggling state-owned carrier. In South Africa, there are legal limits to how much a foreign airline can own. It's basically 25%. That won't give them any form of control very easily. So it's, in my opinion, extremely unlikely that they will find a foreign airline to come in and partner with SAA. There may be private sector investors who would want to. But again, I think that the key requirements are undertakings, guarantees, promises from government in at least 2 or 3 respects. The first is that debt be entirely taken out of the equation, be ring-fenced in an old SAA Mark 1, if you like. And that toxic debt will hopefully just be allowed to be serviced if SAA Mark II becomes profitable. And the other point is that any new private sector owner would want complete control over the labor and employment aspects, a complete review of all procurement policies, of all so-called evergreen employment policies, and the, quite frankly, high salaries that SAA employees have held themselves entitled to. This is a huge shake-up, which is a political risk that government might not be prepared to take.
All right, so you're saying SA in a very difficult place. We could see more bailouts, retrenchments on hold for now. That was the editor of SA Flyer magazine, Guy Leitch. Thank you very much.